Hey everybody, welcome back. Got another little outdoor video here for you. It's once again a very beautiful day, and got to enjoy it while you can. I know the weather's going to change a little bit. We're not quite out of winter yet, so got to take advantage of the nice days when you get them. And I hope you're all having a great day. I'm going to dive right into a somewhat controversial topic for certain people, a topic that a lot of the rest of us know all about. Those of you that have ever gotten to a point where you were single for whatever reason, you attempted to re-enter the dating market to discover that everything is quite different, especially in the past 5-6 years, or some would even argue the last 10 to 15. And I'm going to address today the hookup culture. The hookup culture, are things shifting or changing at all? For those of you that are aware of that, and I'm going to try to define it a little bit at first, because some of you that come here, you might be like, what in the world is hookup culture? Which would almost seem incomprehensible to me that somebody wouldn't know what that is these days. I think a lot of people do, but let's try to give a definition to this if we can. Hookup culture really kind of stems from two schools of thought, where either you are somebody who's a bit more traditional, you have more of a spiritual and deep, meaningful approach to the view of physical intimacy. I can't use certain words here on YouTube. I'm trying not to get flagged. I've had people warn me. So either you view it as a certain meaningful act, physical intimacy, if you know what I'm saying, or it's something that you view as something that is sort of a recreational thing that you could just use out there with anybody. You could just at any given point decide you want to do that with somebody you meet at a club, or somebody you meet at the gym, or somebody you meet wherever, and you don't have any specific guidelines of having a long-term relationship required, or having that person get to know you, or anything like that. You just simply, without those things in place, go ahead and engage in it, which most of us would define as hooking up. You're aware that the likelihood of this being long-term, or the fact that you haven't set it up as something long-term before you go into that, you know to a certain degree that you are essentially hooking up. So I guess the real question I would want to start with is, I would want to get feedback from everybody else here. How do you view it? Do you view physical intimacy as something that you just literally hand out to anybody? Is it something, and I'm not even saying that in a derogatory sense. I'm saying that in the sense of, how do you actually view it? How do you, the viewers, view physical intimacy? Is this something that should be reserved? Because I know that we're not just speaking about, there'll be many men that come to my videos that are very red pill. I consider myself to a certain degree red pill. There'll be many men that come to the videos that will address it only solely towards women, but they don't also address the fact that that doesn't happen if men aren't getting involved too. And a lot of their justification for that will be, well, if most of the women out here are only going to go for the top 5-10% of men, why don't we just, if we fall into enough of a category where enough of them are interested in us, why don't we just go ahead and sleep around? Why don't we just do that? And I guess my stance would fall along the lines of a number of other content creators that I've seen over the years. I kind of agree with them that I feel like self-control is a huge thing. Learning to not add to and cause problems and create more of an environment for that sort of thing to happen. Simply checking out of it. And you might say, well, waiting for a long-term relationship just seems impossible. Well, we're not animals. We have self-control. We have the ability to reason and not step into a situation like that. So I'm kind of injecting a little bit of my own personal viewpoint into that, but I'm curious as to what you all think about that. And not just what you think. Do you think that that is causing damage to society? Do you think that's causing damage to personal relationships and trust? Because if you don't value that sort of thing, then what type of fidelity would you have in a relationship with somebody if you've been practicing for years the, quote unquote hookup culture, but at some point you now say you want to be in a long-term relationship? Are you conditioning yourself to view physical intimacy as something that's kind of a free-for-all that you can hand out to anybody, but now you're going to suddenly restrict it to one person? How is that person whether it's a male or female, no matter which side you're coming from, how are they going to view it? How are they going to view it if it looks to them like that's a meaningless thing to you? How would there be faithfulness and fidelity? They're kind of wondering when they look at that, and I'm getting this like from feedback from people all over the place. How are they going to look at that as something where you've demonstrated that commitment means something to you, and that commitment in that area means something to you? So, I mean, these are good questions to ask. I mean, these are good questions to ask ourselves. If you allow that sort of thing to happen in your life, how do you demonstrate that to somebody that you're coming into a relationship with? And don't we owe that to a person in a relationship? Don't we owe transparency? Don't we owe honesty? Don't we owe fidelity to them? And if we come into it and it looks like we're just kind of not taking some of those areas seriously, look at it from their point of view. Understandably, that would be a cause for concern. They don't want to be involved with somebody who treats it that lightly, because then you could go right out behind their back and treat it that lightly because you're so used to doing that. Definitely food for thought, right? So I guess I would want to address too, there seems to be, the beginnings of, at the very least, a potential decline in the area of hookup culture. When I say decline, I mean, I'm reading more and more articles and learning about people that are actually talking about this. I'm reading more and more stuff and hearing about it where people are beginning to pull back away from it. Men and women no longer interested in dating unless there's going to be an actual relationship. They don't want to hook up with a person from the club. They don't want to get involved with somebody from work or the gym or wherever you run into people. They don't want to do that. They don't want to hook up with people through online dating sites anymore. In fact, I think most people that have had any experience with online dating, I will tell you, I attempted it for a very short period of time at one point, and that put me off of it for good. I just, the level of insanity that I encountered on there, I came away from that realizing that if I wanted somebody that was going to be honest and straightforward and realistic, that was not the place to look. And but for those of you that are out there, what are you sensing out there? Kind of, boots on the ground. What are you noticing about what's going on out there? I'm running into more and more men, in particular, because I'm not exactly running around just popping up out of the blue and asking these questions to random women. But I'd love to hear from the women in the comments. What do you think? You don't just walk up to somebody and say that. You got to be honest. That would be kind of weird. What do you think about random hooking up without them either looking at you like you're crazy or thinking that you're trying to proposition them in some way? You can't exactly go out there and just get a poll of what people think about it. So let's talk about it here. What do you think about that? Do you think hookup culture is actually on the decline and people are starting to pull away from relationships that feel meaningless? And I've begun to notice too, and I'd love to hear feedback on this as well, not just relationships that are meaningless. I think that people are beginning to realize that the trust has been broken between, in particular, men and women. The trust has just been broken, where if you're not really sure who you're dealing with on a daily basis, what their behavior is going to be, or anything like that. And we're not talking about like some sort of controlling psycho. A lot of people will take words like I just said there and string it into some sort of a, you can't be sure of what somebody's going to do. But let's be realistic and sane here for a minute. You can't have a relationship with somebody, man or woman, doesn't matter which gender you're coming at it from, that you don't know who they are and if they're going to keep their word and if they're going to be honest with you about who they get involved with, who they're entertaining and chatting with on the side. And I'm not talking about reporting to them like you're being, watched under a microscope. I'm talking about if you can't have basic transparency and honesty, there's no chance of having a successful relationship. I think that that's a fairly straightforward and sane way to look at it. I think some people take it to the extreme where they act like anybody that attempts to limit their ability to go out there and have their other options is somehow oppressing them or hurting them. For anybody that feels that way, you probably need to just stop dating people and stop creating damage. That's the only thing I can tell you. You probably won't listen to me either if you're of that mindset, because most people that get into that mindset, they're so convinced that dating is a game that they play where you con people and everybody's trying to one up one another. But there's so many of us out there that don't want that anymore. And I keep hearing this from people all over the place, which is one of the reasons why I'm bringing it up. So many people are just tired of that type of culture. It's a culture of con artistry and dishonesty and lack of transparency. And you can't have a point blank conversation like I was saying in another video that I had, where you have to ask yourself, can you have a conversation like if you were sitting in front of me right now and we were talking, can you be blunt and brutally honest with somebody to their face and find out what they're about when it comes to how they stand with fidelity, how they stand with honesty, how they stand with transparency? Can they tell you what they want with that? Just like, can they tell you what they want to do with their life? Can they tell you that, and do they shy away from it because they're scared of that? That is a huge, huge warning sign. That's a huge warning sign. Seeing honesty, truth, intimacy, fidelity, and faithfulness, seeing those things as a weakness is incredibly dangerous for our personal relationships and our society as a whole. Seeing those things as a weakness. And I feel like a lot of people feel like hookup culture is a way of seeing everything that I just described as a form of a weakness. That you don't want to be a part of that, because how are you going to get a one-up on somebody that's dating? You got to be sure you've got people in reserve in case they've got people in reserve, and then you got to have your other people that you're chatting with just in case they do, and then you got to keep so-and-so or your ex's phone number just so that you can bounce back to that at any given point, but you're also scared that they're going to do that. That just seems like a completely unwinnable situation for any party involved. So, do you feel like any of the hookup culture is on the decline? I mean, we can always hope, but with recent studies showing that it's estimated right now that about 50% of women in the future, in particular, are going to end up single and childless going into old age. And some of the psychologists that have been looking into this, one of which is Jordan Peterson, has talked about what it's like when he counsels women that have been through that. And I'm picking this particular study just because it's something that's been thoroughly looked into. What type of regrets they have when they realize that they are literally going to grow old alone and they will be without anybody. And this isn't about preaching you shouldn't grow old alone, or you shouldn't grow old and have cats and live in your apartment and collect purses or whatever it is you like to collect. It's thinking about how that's going to affect you psychologically. And even for that with the men, we have to consider that, facing ourselves personally, what's going to happen if we never have a sense of sanity, honesty, truth, and fidelity, faithfulness come back into relationships, which that's what the hookup culture is. The hookup culture, in my mind, is literally the lack of those things. It's the lack of having all of that in place just in our society and our personal relationships. It's just the lack of all of that. So for those of you that feel like maybe some things might be shifting versus some of you, I'm sure will feel like, no, it's just as bad and it's got a long ways to go before we bottom out and it gets really, really bad. And then finally people will get so tired of it that everything starts to shift the other direction. What are your thoughts? I'll probably do some more follow-up videos on this. There's tons of stuff to talk about this. It seems like relationship stuff seems to be what you guys like to hear about quite a bit. And unfortunately, when it comes to bad in that area, there's plenty to talk about. I've read on some of my other videos the accounts of people and their experiences with everything from going through marriages and divorces all the way down to just the dating world out there and what it's like. And one of my videos that talked about my own horror story, just getting through a divorce process, is minimal compared to some of the accounts that I've read. That I might actually bring some of those men's and women's stories onto the channel here and talk about it, because wow, they've got a horror story that really makes mine look pretty small. It really puts mine to shame. And kind of like, okay, yeah, I didn't go through anything. You guys have actually been through a way worse hell than I've ever been through. So sometimes it's a good thing to give those stories a voice, not because we're complaining, but because awareness is important to stopping any issue or problem. If you're not aware of it, you can't stop it. You can't shift course, even in your own personal life. If you can't change society, we can always change us. We can always protect ourselves at all times and try to get back to some sort of semblance of sanity and reason in our life. Well, that's it for today. And I hope you guys are having a great day. I mentioned in my other videos, I'm gonna keep on posting more content, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you guys even more, and looking forward to your feedback. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, notification bell, because you'll want to see it when I put more stuff up. Really appreciate you guys, every last one of you, even the negative comments. Got to enjoy it. Sometimes it's a little bit entertaining to read some of the craziness in the comment section. So I hope you all have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.